Let's start with the scene in Washington. How is the 104th Congress doing in its first 100 days?
Well, you know, I think they're concerned. They're making a display of how responsive they're being to the outcry for, you know, democratic reform in the Congress and across the country. They're in a sense, the House is passing the bills that are easiest to pass, not tackling the really difficult questions, even though they're saying that that's what Clinton was doing with the budget. They're doing exactly the same thing, and that's not surprising because it's all about politics. And what the 104th is trying to do is to show that the Republican Party and Republican Party control of Congress really means a more responsive government and so on, which of course is plainly not true. So they're trying to, effectively, co-opt the ferment that is manifest in the country. You see that with the way they're trying to handle the term limits, business term limits, which has been passed by, you know, so many millions of voters in the country. It was passed as a fairly radical statement calling for significant limitation of terms, and what it really gives expression to is a strong, very strong grassroots populist desire for profound restructuring. The Republicans are effectively trying to take it over and co-opt it into something far more palatable, which still projects the image of the Republican Party becoming or being the party of the people and so on. So, you know, I mean, it's business as usual. It's two-party politicking as usual, and one of the things that means is that one of the other parties historically, you know, takes over what independence and what the people have put forth and attempts to shape it in ways which turns it into two-party politicking. In this case, it's the Republican Party who has done that with the mass movement of Perot, et cetera, and so forth. So I mean, that's what's going on with the 104th. It's the postmodern version, the Republicanized version of traditional two-party politics. What's still profound and different and significant is what's happening and being done by the masses of the American people. I mean, that's where it's really at, and what they're doing in Washington is trying to figure out how to put a spin on that so that it looks like they're responsive, when in fact they're no more or less responsive now than they were 2 months ago, 2 years ago, indeed 2 decades ago.
I've been doing interviews with people, I mean on radio shows, where a lot of folks call in, and many of them are Republicans. So one thing is that people are not fooled particularly about what's going on in Washington. Even people who have voted for the Republicans, the expressed statement is that people have a wait and see attitude, but they also realize that they're soft-pedaling a lot of what it is that they promised to do, in the ways that Fred's speaking to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I agree that what I was describing is what I think is going on. I think a different issue is how's that being perceived by the American people, and I think you're quite right in saying in general the American people are, you know, waiting and seeing. They're looking to see whether the Republicans are going to do anything that really makes a difference. So, you know, so in a sense the heat is on the Republicans, although more importantly the heat is on two-party politics. You know, again and again and again I was watching I don't know, McNeil here or something, and there was a discussion of the Clinton budget that came down, which never touched entitlements, obviously a political move to get the Republicans to make the first statement about cutting entitlements and so on and so forth. And again, you're hearing this frequently. So one of the, and these kind of, some key congressional leaders of the Republican Party and so on. But one of the things that they're more and more saying is something like, and if this doesn't get done, if we don't find a way to do this, then indeed there will be a third or a fourth party. And that clause comes in more and more and more now. So it's clear that a third party, a fourth party is a specter haunting America right now. That's kind of that's more and more clear.
How's Bill Clinton doing?
Well, you know, Bill is, in some ways, Bill is doing what Bill knows how to do. Clinton's a profoundly partisan politician. He's absolutely committed to, you know, I think I mentioned, you know, that in his State of the Union, you know, which was this typically sprawling, long-winded and elaborate statement with modest passion. The only genuine passion, in my experience, that came from the president, from Mr. Clinton, was when he talked about those Democrats who lost office because they, you know, voted against, you know, the handguns, and that was where his real passion is. Democrats lost that, you know, and it's almost as if he was saying of those people, they will not be forgotten in the way that most American presidents say that of veterans of wars and so on like that, you know. So, but what does Clinton know from wars? I mean, he's a draft dodger. That's what he is. So to him, the real passion comes of he cost some Democrats some seats, and that's what he cares about. He's a partisan politician. So I think he's trying to figure out how to maneuver in this situation, to continue to play politics, and you know, and he's a pretty decent two-party politician. I mean, he did get himself elected president of the United States. That's not bad. Most people don't do that. So he's got some skill at this, but the capacity to rule, to govern, is what, of course, he doesn't have. But in a sense, from the vantage point of contemporary American postmodern two-party politics, it doesn't make a difference whether you govern. All they care about, ultimately, is finding a way of sustaining a two-party system and staying in political power. Whether they can effectively deal with any of the problems of the American people is not an issue. Whether they can effectively stay in power through this wave of electoral revolutionary fervor on the part of the American people. And in that, the Democrats and Republicans are engaged in a joint activity. Although, to be sure, each is doing it in a different way because they have historical differences in their bases and their ideologies and their political histories, and you know, and et cetera. But so Bill Clinton is playing the Democratic Party self-perpetuative game, and you know, and trying to play hardball politics with Newt Gingrich, who is a formidable player, and that's what's going down. And the American people are you know, watching this and saying, well, is any of this ever going to lead to engaging and dealing with any of the fundamental problems that face the American people? And you know, that they're desperately looking to find the shortest road to accomplish that, and surely the shortest road would be to have either the Democrats or the Republicans or both of them together do this. But more and more the experience is they won't. Indeed, there's some reason to believe they can't. That's not the kinds of, that they have become political parties that are simply concerned with their own self-perpetuation and their own power and their own influence and so on, but that they, in so doing, they don't have the capacity to rule America, to govern America. That's a fundamental issue. So, I mean, I think that's what Clinton is doing. I don't know. Some days I think he does well. He makes some very, very good moves, you know. Some days he looks like a fool and an idiot, and he always looks like a philanderer and a cheat, but that's a whole other issue. He got elected president looking like a philanderer and a cheat. So.
One thing, Fred, I was just thinking, the issue of if they can make decisions and make moves that would respond to the crises in this country. One of the things that people said for many years relative to third-party politics is that their issues are always taken in by one of the two major parties, as you spoke about the Republicans being able to do, co-opt it, with the democracy issues, term limits and other things like that. So I was just wondering, because people are still expecting and speaking to some degree about the capacity of the two-party system to co-opt these democracy issues. I was just wondering if what you thought about that.
Well, I mean, my own feeling is that at its deepest level, I mean, after all, the democracy issues, first of all, there are many of them, and second of all, they all appear in many different forms and at many different levels. So at its deepest level, in my opinion, what the American people and what the democracy movement is about is the American people calling ultimately for a fundamental political restructuring, which would have to mean doing in, reshaping, wiping out the two-party system. So plainly, almost by definition, the two-party system is not going to be able to co-opt that. Mm-hmm. Now, can the two-party system co-opt the other issues, referendum, initiative, term limits, all the specific issues, and can they co-opt it in a way which creates what I would identify as the illusion of a profound restructuring without engaging the issue of this most conservative political form, namely two-partyism, which has dominated America from the very outset? I don't know. Maybe they can. I mean, they've been very effective at hanging on to two-partyism for a very, very long time. But again, in some ultimate sense, I don't think that's co-optable, because ultimately what the American people are calling for is a restructuring of a qualitative nature, and that means dealing with the core elements of the current political structure, which is a two-party arrangement. But I mean, there's the answer to how that's going to play in the next several years is who the hell knows? I mean, I don't know how it's going to play. I mean,
Lenore, you've been talking with members of the Congressional Black Caucus, elected Democrats and so forth, about both the democracy issue and the general political situation in Congress and the country. What do those discussions look like? Where are they at about what's unfolding now?
Mm-hmm. Well, even by some of their own admission, some of them are still sort of shell-shocked relative to the Republican Party takeover, and have a lot of reactions, I guess, to being in a party that's no longer the majority party in the country. In some discussions, some of the members have made it clear that they thought, for example, I've been talking to them amongst many things about independent politics and the possibility of black congressional people considering a independent run in 1996 if they thought that was doable. I think that in some districts, black congressmen could win as independents, and
most districts, I think.
Mm-hmm. In most districts that they could, and have gotten some agreement on that. I mean, I think there's still a kind of conservatism. I think that my role relative to the CBC is to raise these democracy issues, and I think the position and perspective that is connected, that black people have on different issues. So, for example, even though much of the CBC, I don't know if this is true for all of them, but no one has come out to support term limits, even though they don't seem to be in support of them, whenever they appear on the ballot, black as well as white people support term limits. And I think that that's something that the Congress members as well as local members are going to have to, elected officials are going to have to come to terms with, because it is part of a growing momentum and movement, not just amongst the white community, but amongst people in the country. But I think the conversations are promising. I think we have to keep them going and keep building at the grassroots and organizing around these issues in the African American community.
So I think an exquisite contradiction is being raised for black political leaders and liberal political leaders right now. And that contradiction, in a way, it's always been there, but it's now more exquisite, more pronounced, more profound than ever before, in my opinion. And that contradiction is, are you ultimately going to support the black agenda, the liberal agenda, or are you ultimately, at this moment in time, going to support the Democratic Party? Because while for a long time you could make out the case that those two were identical, they are now transparently divergent. So there are now moves that they could make which would be very supportive of the black agenda, or dimensions of it, very supportive of the liberal agenda in the case of black liberals, in the case of white liberals, but would probably mean doing things which are going to be hurtful to the current power of the Democratic Party. So, I mean, in my own opinion, if liberals are ultimately going to be true to liberalism, if black leaders are going to be true in any manner, shape, or form to the black agenda, they're going to have to give up their preoccupation with the Democratic Party, because they're not going to get anything resembling those kinds of agendas in place by simply staying locked into a life-or-death struggle to maintain the current level of the Democratic Party, which, by the way, is a level that is going down, 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 down. I mean, they're no longer in control after 40 years of the Congress of the United States. So that's a really, as I say, exquisite and interesting and important contradiction. I mean, the Republicans have their own contradictions, and that's a whole other issue. So for the Republican Party, you got a very strong right wing, which has to figure out what it's going to do about supporting what is now fast becoming a majoritarian party, or whether they're going to stay true to their right-wing principles. So there's another set of issues over there. But all of this is the situation that we now have is so profoundly different because the American people have moved into the arena and are now providing more and more leadership, have all kinds of opinions which are manifest in polls, which are manifest in Perot's 20 million votes, which are manifest in third-partyism, which are manifest in more and more people from, you know, from a Paul Tsongas to a Doug Wilder to, you know, and so on, you know, breaking ranks. You know, I mean, it's hard to know whether Jackson is breaking ranks, since Jackson always threatens to break ranks. But that's the contradiction, isn't it? I mean, I think that's an interesting and important contradiction to keep, you know, exacerbating, if you will, to keep magnifying and pointing out and saying, you're going to have to make this decision at some point.
Mm-hmm. One thing that it looks like is not only that the Republicans have been able to better co-opt the democracy issues, but it seems like they seem more in tune with or have a greater recognition of what the American people are saying than the Democrats.
Well, I mean, that's what the American people are saying.
That's why they got voted.
The democracy issue is no small part of what the American people are saying. I mean, it's not just an abstract issue. It's what the American people are saying. They're saying, let's knock the hell out of this deficit. Let's reduce taxes. Let's have less government. We don't want big government. We want, et cetera. You know, those are the kinds of things that are being said. We want, but I think even beyond that, the American people are saying, let's figure out what the hell to do about these social crises. And that immediately raises the democracy issue, because what they do is they see two big parties in Washington, you know, that are concerned with wheeling and dealing with each other and maintaining power and so on and so forth, but who are ineffective in dealing with issues of, you know, welfare, issues of crime, issues of joblessness, issues of moral and social decay, issues of health care. I mean, things aren't being dealt with. So yeah, I think the Republicans are more, in some sense, more sensitive to that right now, to where the American people are at. The Democrats are, you know, way, way, way out of touch, and there's no easy way for them to get easily back in touch, because their whole party is structured on the basis of moving in a certain way, in a certain kind of direction, has been for 40, 50, 60 years, and you don't so easily turn that all around, that whole complex infrastructure of the Democratic Party. So you wind up, you know, in some ways staying consistently out of touch and further out of touch. The Republicans have had the advantage of being out of power in some respects.
Might put you more in touch.
No. I think it at least puts you enough in touch to figure out how you're going to use what the American people are doing to get yourself back in power and to be more dominant within a two-party arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
What about the debate about welfare reform and, you know, crime and jobs and so forth? Does that lead anywhere at this point? Is there a real set of solutions or approaches that can be found to these kinds of issues right now?
Well, I mean, that's a multi-level question. I mean, yeah. So the polls say that the American people, including Democrats, and the people of New York State, including Democrats, want workfare. And I don't doubt that they do. I mean, I think that people see the welfare system as simultaneously a big expense and a big failure. So for the people who have been so-called people who've been benefited by it, they see it as a colossal failure. And I think it is a colossal failure. On the other hand, the people who are, quote, paying the money for it see it as a big drain and so on. Now, most people, of course, recognize that there has to be some way of dealing with the poor, that you can't just cut out Social Security, you can't just do in Medicaid, Medicare, and so on. You can't just, so the issue, so you talk about going to workfare and instead of welfare, and it makes it sound like that's a real solution, but it's not a real solution. Because if people go on to workfare, you still have some of the profound crises. In fact, you probably create a few new ones, because if you cut back on your expenses by not supporting a lot of the people who are currently supported on welfare, well, then those people still have to go to hospitals. They still are going to wind up in prisons. They're still going to represent an expense for the entire society, if you put it in those crass kinds of terms. So workfare per se is not a solution to anything. The question is whether or not you can create an economic arrangements which bring more people in ways which are developmental and growthful economically into the workforce. See, the issue is not workfare as a substitution for welfare, which is the way they want to frame it, because that's the easy, quick fix thing. It's creating more good jobs. It's creating more productive jobs. Now, that, it seems to me, is what's being avoided by all this thing on workfare rather than welfare, and that can only be engaged in the final analysis by a restructuring of the political arrangement so that the American people can have a greater impact on public sector and private sector social and economic policy. Until we get to that place, then all this other stuff is quick fix stuff, which can get the budget a little better here, a little worse here. But what happens is, if you save money by doing this, then under the current arrangement, you'll cost yourself money over here. So it turns out that I don't think that there are effective governmental management solutions to this. There are political solutions, but that's all being, at least by the Republicans and Democrats, being put on the back burner, because those political solutions are endangering to their two-party control of American political life. That's the... So I think, so yeah, again, it's not as if you can't have particular debates over this piece of legislation or that piece of legislation, but I don't think any of them are going to work.
Mm-hmm. I think the job that we have as builders of the independent movement and people who have a different take on the creation of an environment where democracy can flourish, have as, our job and responsibility over the next 2 years and, more, to really hip people, if you will, about how these debates around these issues really do cover over the serious solution of coming up with reforms from initiative and referendum to term limits to, political solutions that will reorganize how politics is done in America. Because people get really taken into, taking one side or the other on these issues, but they don't go anywhere. And the degree to which we can expose that and expose what we need to be concerned with at this point, I think will have a dramatic impact on where we go.
Yeah. I mean, at the risk of sounding like a radical, which I, of course, am, it seems to me that we have to make clear that while reform, referendum, initiative, term limits, fair debates, the whole democracy package of legislation is of enormous importance. It's of enormous importance as part of a political process which leads to a fundamental restructuring of a two-party America. It's important because I don't think that we're going to see a fundamental change in the way politics is done in this country with greater direct participation within a representative system of government unless we see a move beyond this two-party arrangement, which is conservative and stifling. I think Tim Penny, and what he's been saying for years now is correct. You got to put 100 independents in the Congress. You've got to put 30, 40, 50 independents, and we'll start to see some brand new dynamics. You got to have term limits so that you start to bring new people in who can then make use of the expertise of the so-called permanent government people rather than simply becoming a bloc which does inside the Beltway politics, which is completely out of touch with the American people. There's got to be ways to bring the American people more directly in so that they can impact on social policy and be full participants in carrying out what qualitative transformations have to occur. So I guess I'm just saying that because while I agree that we have to continue to push concretely for recall, referendum, term limits. All of those are important. Fundamentally, the issue of developing, creating a third party, a fourth party, a breakdown of two-partyism, that's where it's got to ultimately come to. And in my opinion, if it doesn't come there, and until it comes there, there's not going to be a political environment for engaging fundamental social crises in this country.
Well, you bring up the issue of electing independents to office. What does the 1996 presidential look like to you from this vantage point, and do you think there will be one or more major independent candidacies for the president?
Well, one of the things that...
You counting Clinton as a major one? Or
now, Doctor. One of the things that we did coming out of, I guess, the November '94 election was to form a committee for a unified independent party, which is a committee I chair, and use as a way to reach out to independent parties and individuals around the country, of which there are many, in an effort to get as many of us as possible to the table to talk about some of the ways in which we could, jointly support congressional candidates and potentially a presidential candidate around issues that we could come to agreement on. And I'm hopeful, I'm always hopeful, that we'll be able to make use of this work in advancing the possibility of having a strong independent presidential candidate, because as we've been saying over the past few months, given the fractiousness, I guess, of the Democratic and Republican parties and the independent movement, that the degree to which one of those groupings is able to get themselves best consolidated and together by '96 will have a tremendous impact on who can win the White House. So, that's something we've been thinking about.
Well, I agree with what, what Lenore was saying. I think that there is clearly political motion out there. That's just abundantly clear. Every poll, the Perot movement, there's political motion. The American people are in my opinion, are in a revolutionary mood. I think that what they're into is an electoral revolution, a democracy revolution. But they're into, I think, seeking out fundamental change. And even those who are more concerned just with this particular change or that particular change, whether they're deficit people or debt people or tax people or whatever. And there's a broad... I think if you look just beyond the particularity of their issues, what you hear them talking about is that, well, there has to be fundamental structural political changes. So I think that's there. There's a massive constituency for that. Perot, of course, tapped into it, ran a campaign that was, in some respects a very good one, in other respects lacking in certain ways, but still got 20 million votes, an astounding number of votes, an amazing kind of showing just 2 years ago. So that's there. There's that great constituency there, and everyone is going out and trying to grab it. Obviously, the Democrats are, the Republicans are. We see that. But within the independent movement, there are also many, many different forces who are trying to get those 20, 30, 40 million Americans, to get that, to find a way of shaping that movement in ways which are consistent with their particular agendas or their particular goals. Some of those agendas and goals are, in my opinion, mainly in the final analysis about bringing those folks back into the Democratic or Republican parties. Some of them are about creating a new party with very, very heavy control coming from this source or that source, from top down, from here, there, whatever. So there's all kinds of players, from a Tsongas to a Jackson to a Perot, all kinds. And those are the players who have names big enough to make it into the newspapers, to an Al Sharpton, to a Lenore Fulani. These are the players. But what's critical here, not just to be kind of abstractly populist, but what's critical here is that the leadership for this is actually coming from the mass of the American people. That's who's providing the serious leadership. And the question is whether or not there's going to be created a party a political party and a candidacy, for example, in '96, which somehow most directly comes out of that mass movement rather than something resembling a top-down co-optation of that mass movement. And that's a difficult and delicate question, because obviously the top-downers have all kinds of things going for them. They have access to the media, they have a lot of money, they have this, they have that. But the American people have something going for us also. We have masses of people, we have masses, potentially masses of votes. We're a somewhat organized constituency. I mean, the fact of the matter is that for all of Perot's dollars, it was the American people who got him on the ballot. It was Perot who got the name recognition through Larry King, through spending his dollars and who ran the campaign. But the American people went out and made a mockery of the unfair ballot access laws by simply saying, what do you require, 60,000 signatures? We'll get 3 million. Yeah. So go check them out. That was a move that the American people made. So the question becomes whether or not that mass movement, that revolutionary mood, that electoral revolutionary mood, whether we can, whether some force can, and clearly the person who's going to most lead that is Dr. Fulani and the people who follow her, and in my opinion, is to come up with a third party or a fourth or whatever number party which captures and gives the most direct expression to the American people, to ordinary people, to the ordinary, which is democratic, not simply in what it articulates for Congress, but democratic in the very process that it goes through in becoming a political party of the people. Is that possible, or is that just idealistic bullshit and so on? Well, it's very likely that it is idealistic bullshit. I don't know. That's the issue on the table, and obviously what goes on is a complex dynamic. I think those named people, I think that it's very important for those named people to be involved. But I think that they have to be involved and not be fully in control. There's got to be a dialectic, a synthesis of those people as they participate in a mass movement of the American people. It's the American people, I think, that are, frankly, providing the greatest leadership in this country right now politically, except they don't have, that leadership is not organized in a way which gives it a clear political and powerful expression. But they're providing the leadership on everything from NAFTA to Clinton's a bank loan and propping up of the Mexican economy, which is really propping up of his big business honchos down in Mexico. It doesn't help out the Mexican people at all, nor does it help out the American people, to term limits, to so on. I mean, that's where the leadership is really coming from. But what does it have to look like for that to gain expression rather than just being effectively co-opted? That's the issue on the agenda right now. And no small part of what that means, to speak in very practical terms, is us going out, is Fulani and Patriot, is Patriot going out and winning the day by us building the damn grassroots movement. If Patriot does that, Patriot will, in my opinion, in the long haul, win out, no matter who the hell is making deals and no matter who the hell is meeting in back rooms, whether Republicans, Democrats, or Independents. Patriot will win out if we, in fact, go directly to the American people and put out this perspective and say, we insist that we will be represented, the small person, the ordinary woman, the ordinary man, black, white, Latino, Asian American, gay and straight, that all Americans, the American people, that's not just going to be rhetoric of a party, we will be represented at those damn meetings. If we do that, in my opinion, call it idealistic bullshit if you like, but frankly, I don't think that anything else is going to ultimately work given the crisis in American democracy. I think that's our direction. I think that's our direction.
Would you have thoughts about what that organizing needs to look like at the grassroots during '95, for example, where there aren't many statewide or congressional elections, but lots of local elections? What do you think the concentration should look like in this critical sort of transition year into the '96 presidential?
It should be bringing people on board, signing up people as activists into parties, into where there's ballot status, into other parties, as part of an... I think that what we should be doing right now is effectively describable as we should be beginning the People's Presidential Convention right now, in the streets, in the communities, in Montana, in Alabama, in New York, in California, all across the community, say, let the people nominate an independent candidate. Let the people do that, and you do that. There are vehicles available for now doing that. I think that's the process, so you direct it towards 96. 96 is when a lot of the big elections, including the presidency, come up, including, you know, congressional seats and so on, and some Senate seats. But you organize that process. And you take that out from the work that, you know, Fulani is doing with Sharpton and the black community around a political agenda, to the work that Patriot should be doing, to the work that that QUIP is doing, that CUIP is doing, to bring in other activists. You take it out to the people and say, let's us have the dialogue on who's going to be the independent presidential candidate. And then you say, well, so there'll be reps coming out of that which go, who effectively can say, again, to the big names in the independent movement, we want your big name, we want your dollars, but you're going to have to recognize that this is going to be a cooperative arrangement between the American people and you folks who want to do independent politics with your big names, not just another ripoff. Let's be clear on that one.
Mm-hmm. One thing I was thinking about is when you were talking about the relationship between initiatives and referendum and recall relative to busting up the two-party system, is that you can, I think this is similar even when you're thinking about independent politics, because there could be a major independent political presidential campaign where, you know, somebody gets more than 20 million votes. In fact, maybe if even someone gets elected. But if we don't come out of that with a political party, with organization, then we're right back in many ways, you know, where we started. We're not just looking to fill the White House with, you know, a new resident. We're looking to build a political party in this country for the American people.
Look at the Connecticut experience. Weicker does win. He gets elected governor, but a Connecticut party, either by lack of will or lack of desire or whatever reason, fails to build a political party. And so, again, it's not as if Weicker didn't do some worthwhile things, but the ongoing gains, the ongoing need for something which gives political expression to what Weicker and some other, and many, many people in the state believed in, and that's why they elected him in the first place, it's not there. It wasn't created. A Connecticut party loses major party ballot status, goes to minor, minor party ballot status. They only have like a few thousand people signed up. This guy was governor for 4 years, but so you don't have the vehicle. People are not so keen to create people's parties, because the thing about people's party, a lot of people don't like them because the people have so much control in them. And they don't know. I mean, again, there's an attitude towards democracy in America, which is, you know, let's hang on to democracy as an issue or as something that we can make use of in Washington when it benefits two parties or when it benefits the big shots. But the issue of democracy, meaning ultimately believing in the capacity of the American people en masse to have the judgment to determine where and how we will move ahead. You talk to a lot of these people, including the liberals and including the conservatives across the whole spectrum, they don't believe in it. They think it's a mistake. They think experts have to do it. It's a fundamental political, ideological, including the independents. They think experts have to do it. That's the issue, I think, that's ultimately on the table in this moment in American history, you know.
Well, part of how people would become more sophisticated and develop the expertise is by virtue of participating in the process and shaping and growing and developing and giving direction.
But I think the argument is very strong that the people who haven't participated very much know much more about where to go right now than the experts do. I mean, I don't think this is a good day, this is a good time to argue for the incredibly powerful record of the experts. The experts have, you know, I mean, take a look at where things are at. This has to be attributed to the experts. See, I mean, the Bill Clintons and the Newt Gingriches and the whole political Republican Democratic Party apparatus and all their advisors, these are where the experts have gotten us. Now, it doesn't follow that the American people aren't smart enough to realize that we need, you know, expertise. And the American people know how to go find a doctor when they need a doctor. They know how to go find a lawyer when they need a lawyer. They know how to find a political scientist when they need one of those. But the American people, I think, have shown, in my opinion, a greater sensitivity and a greater sensibility around what's really wrong with America than the experts in Washington.
On the democracy issue, again, when Patriot was founded in Arlington, we drafted and adopted a set of principles which focused largely on the issue of democratic reform, government accountability, and fiscal responsibility. Going into this next national convention, there's been some discussion or some interest expressed on the part of patriots, some patriots around the country, of needing to put more programmatics, positions on issues, into the Patriot Party platform or principles. Could you comment on how you think the principles are holding up and what you think about this issue of programmatics at this point in the party building process?
I mean the issues of the principles are holding up quite well. I mean, I think what has to happen is we have to accelerate the organizing and grow in all the states, and et cetera and so forth. I mean, I personally would not be particularly supportive of going in the direction of increased programmatics for a very obvious reason, in my opinion. Programmatics becomes an issue, it seems to me, a serious issue, when you're in a position to govern, to rule. That's exactly the position that we're not in. You know? I mean, we're in a position right now of trying to restructure the political arrangement so that you can have a government of the people, by the people, for the people, a more representative government, a more democratic government that can then engage these programmatic issues. But in fact, those people who put out a whole bunch of programmatic issues now, we see this, Bill Clinton is the consummate artist at this, and Gingrich is his alter ego. They put out programmatic simply for the purpose of manipulating, in my opinion, things so that they can maintain political power for their two parties, but that the programmatics don't translate into solutions to the problems facing the American people. So programmatics, in a sense, is a myth and a fiction when you're in a situation where you're, number one, not in a position to rule, and two, you're not governing, and it's the case that you have to deal with what really is the crisis, which is the political crisis, which makes it impossible for anyone to rule. So to go into a whole bunch of programmatics and have, dotting I's, crossing T debates on whether this is the right position on abortion, or this is the right position on crime, and this is the right position, is not particularly meaningful. The American people are going to find a way, and I think the American people are doing better than the experts are on attempting to find a way of governing and of living together, given that we have profound differences on these programmatic matters. That's the real deal. You're going to have to find ways of solving things, given diverse populations with diverse interests and diverse perspectives and opinions. But the way to do that, I think, is to stay with our principles and stay focused on the issue of creating a new political structure, which does in two-partyism, a new political structure, a new political arrangement, so that we can have greater participation by the American people, quantitatively, qualitatively, so as to change the nature of the dialogue and the capacity to do something about the crises and the programmatic concerns and issues that face the American people. It's a mistake to lose that focus and start pretending, in my opinion, for Patriot to start pretending that we're in power. We're not in power. That's the very point. We're not in power. The two-party system is in power.
Yeah. I also think there's no substitution for going out in communities and doing the work that Fred laid out for 95, speaking to people, signing them up into parties where that's possible, having our referendum on the 96 presidential race. That's what we need to be doing, and a lot, how I hear people discuss programmatics is as if it's a shortcut, like there's this body of people out there waiting to come in. But if you take out what our principles are, people are tremendously responsive to them. That's, in fact, we got them from the American people. So people need to be out there doing the work of building the party at the grassroots.
I mean, in some ways, Perot showed you how many votes you can get without programmatics. And God, he didn't have them.
Right.
I mean, and he's also showing you what's happened when he went to programmatics. With his lobbying efforts. I mean, he went to programmatics, and his movement, in my opinion, is start to deteriorate. That, in fact, when he put out his strongest line, is when he was saying, the issue is, when people were saying, oh, he's not saying what his position is on this or this or this, but he was saying to the American people, this is our country. We have to run it. We have to be in control of it. Everyone's got to know that they're doing business and doing government in our country. It's an issue of the American people. But when he was putting out those issues of principle, not just detailed programmatics, he was so popular, he was leading in the polls to the presidency as late as June of 1992. Then he goes off and does whatever he does, and then he still gets 20 million votes, and then he makes the shift into lobbying, but lobbying doesn't engage the issue of the fundamental corruption of the two-party political arrangement. And I think things start to fall apart for him, which is why I think he's thinking of coming back into the party building movement, because that's where it's at. The issue facing the American people is the restructuring of the political arrangement. That's the fundamental issue. You don't figure out which battle to fight or where to have the fight if you can't get an army together. That's premature. You don't go out saying, well, we'll go to Khyber Pass and we'll put 30 men here and 7 men here. So wait a second, you don't have an army.
Right.
Oh, I see. You got to have that first. Yes, you've got to do that first. You've got to. There is a process by which that occurs, and out of that process will grow, if it succeeds, a need to engage programmatic issues. But the notion of engaging in programmatic issues first is either indicative of your readiness to be co-opted by the two-party arrangement, or indicative of your unwillingness to go out and do the hard work of building this third party.
Thank you.